China just mastered reusable rockets on their very first try, and NASA's moon plans are in serious trouble. February 11th, 26. The Long March 10 rocket executed a perfect controlled ocean landing after reaching an altitude of 68 miles. That's like launching from New York City, climbing to the edge of space, flipping a 15-story building upside down mid-flight, and landing it vertically on a basketball court in Philadelphia. You heard that right. What took SpaceX 6 years and 15 explosions to figure out, China just did in a single flight. And this breakthrough just handed them the keys to winning the race back to the moon. Here's what happened in those 8 minutes that changed everything. February 11th, 26. Wenchang Space Launch Site. 7 rocket engines roared to life, generating nearly 1 million pounds of thrust. The Long March 10 prototype lifted off into a clear sky. This wasn't just another launch. This was China betting everything on reusable rockets, the technology that separates spacefaring nations from spectators. SpaceX spent 6 years learning this. 6 years of rockets crashing into drone ships, boosters tumbling out of control, engines failing to relight, fireballs lighting up the Atlantic. Each explosion cost tens of millions of dollars. The aerospace industry accepted this as normal. Reusability is hard. The learning curve is brutal, expensive, and very public. China apparently didn't get that memo. The Long March 10 climbed to 68 miles altitude officially in space. The boosters separated and began the impossible part. A 15-story metal cylinder traveling at hypersonic speeds had to flip 180 degrees. Reaction control thrusters fired. The booster rotated from nose up to tail up. 4 grid fins deployed at supersonic speed. These titanium surfaces gave the flight computer control during descent. Then, the engines came back to life. 2 engines reignited for the boost back burn. The rocket was falling backward through space. The engines fired forward, slowing descent and pushing the booster toward the recovery zone. This requires engines that can restart after shutdown. Combustion chambers still glowing hot, turbopumps spinning back up to 50,000 revolutions per minute. Everything has to work perfectly, or you get catastrophic explosion. Both engines fired flawlessly. The booster entered aerodynamic deceleration using atmospheric drag and grid fins to slow down, screaming through the air at multiple times the speed of sound, heating up from friction. Western aerospace engineers watching the telemetry couldn't believe it. The precision was unreal. At 400 feet above the ocean, 3 engines ignited for final landing burn. The rocket hung in the air, balanced on 3 pillars of fire. The flight computer made hundreds of micro adjustments per second. Wind compensation, fuel slosh compensation, center of mass shifts, all calculated in real time. At 16 feet altitude, the booster achieved quasi-hovering. The engines throttled down to barely enough thrust to prevent downward acceleration. Then, it descended in complete control. The Long March 10 first stage touched down in the predetermined ocean area. Vertical, intact, grid fins deployed, engines functional. Recovery vessels moved in. The booster floated upright in the water, looking exactly like it was designed to fly again. Every single system performed within nominal parameters. Landing accuracy, within target zone. Structural integrity, no damage. Engine condition, ready for reuse. China had just joined the exclusive club of nations that can land and reuse orbital-class rocket boosters. On the first operational attempt, no prior failures, no exploded prototypes, no visible learning curve. But here's what made this landing truly terrifying for NASA. Reusable rockets are the difference between going to the moon and staying there. A traditional expendable rocket costs $150 million, one flight. Then the entire vehicle burns up or crashes into the ocean, gone forever. It's like building a new Boeing 747 for a single New York to London flight, then pushing it into the Atlantic. Moon missions require multiple heavy lift launches, crew capsule, lunar lander, fuel, supplies, backup systems. Apollo 17 in 1972 required a Saturn V that cost over $1 billion in today's money for one mission, one landing. Then, we never went back. Why? Because it's ruinously expensive when every rocket is single-use. This is why NASA hasn't returned in 53 years. You can afford one flag-planting mission, but sustained presence, a permanent base, impossible economics. Then SpaceX changed everything. They proved you could land a booster and fly it again. The same Falcon 9 first stage has flown 23 times. 150 million divided by 20 flights equals $7.5 million per launch for the booster. Total cost drops to 50 to 70 million per flight instead of 150 million. Suddenly, the moon becomes affordable. Regular missions become economically viable. But SpaceX paid dearly for that knowledge. April 2015, Falcon 9 ran out of hydraulic fluid during descent, crashed into the ocean in a fireball. January 2016, booster landed, but one leg didn't lock, toppled over, exploded. June 2016, another landing leg failure, another explosion. September 2016, rocket exploded on the pad. $200 million satellite destroyed. It took SpaceX 6 years from first landing attempt to successful booster reuse. 6 years of public trial and error. China watched all of that. They studied every SpaceX failure, analyzed every explosion, then developed their own reusable rocket technology in complete privacy. No public test failures, no embarrassing explosions on live streams, just quiet, methodical development behind closed doors. On February 11th, China emerged with a fully functional reusable rocket system. First operational test. Perfect execution. They compressed a decade of development into a program that appeared overnight, fully formed and working flawlessly. And now they have the exact same economic advantage SpaceX has, the ability to launch repeatedly without building new rockets every time. China's Long March 10 will launch their moon missions. The same booster can fly crew on one mission, then be refurbished and fly cargo on the next, then fuel, then habitat modules, then equipment. One booster, multiple moon missions, costs slashed by 60 to 70%. Without reusability, China's lunar program would be prohibitively expensive. With reusability, they can afford to go to the moon regularly, not once, dozens of times. And they just proved the technology works. But their moon hardware is already ready to fly. Getting to the moon requires 3 pieces: massive rocket, crew capsule, lunar lander. China has all 3, tested and working. The Long March 10 rocket proved itself February 11th. Piece number 1 checked off. The Mengzhou crew capsule was tested the same day. While the booster was landing, Mengzhou proved it could save astronauts in the worst possible emergency. The capsule separated at maximum dynamic pressure, the most violent moment of launch. 8 solid rocket motors fired, yanking the spacecraft away. Grid fins deployed, parachutes bloomed. Mengzhou splashed down exactly as designed. That's the spacecraft carrying Chinese taikonauts to the moon. And it works. Then there's Lanyue lunar lander. Late 2025, China tested touchdown and liftoff. The lander's legs deployed, descent engines fired. It touched down gently. Ascent engines ignited and lifted it back up. Every critical system validated. China has now tested every major component: heavy lift rocket, crew capsule, lunar lander. They're not talking about what they'll build someday. They're testing flight hardware right now. When China announced their lunar program, they set a target of 2030 for first crewed landing. Most analysts thought that was ambitious. After February 11th, those analysts are revising estimates. Because everything is going perfectly. The full Long March 10 configuration 3 stages with bundled booster sys scheduled for orbital testing late 2026 or early 2027, less than a year away. Mengzhou needs an uncrewed orbital flight. But the hard part, max Q separation, is done. Lanyue will conduct a demonstration mission in low Earth orbit in 2027, launch the lander, test descent and ascent systems in space, validate autonomous navigation. Every test China conducts succeeds. No public failures, no explosions, no setbacks. Clockwork precision. Some experts now say China could land taikonauts by 2029, a full year ahead of schedule. 3 years from now, Chinese astronauts could be planting their flag on the lunar surface. And China isn't planning one landing for prestige. They're planning sustained presence, a research base at the lunar South Pole, operating year-round. The February 11th reusability breakthrough makes that economically viable. Meanwhile, NASA is watching with growing alarm. NASA has been planning Artemis for over a decade, billions invested, international partnerships formed, political capital spent. The timeline seems solid. Artemis 2 launches March 26 weeks away. 4 astronauts fly around the moon aboard Orion, powered by the Space Launch System. A test flight, no landing. Then Artemis 3 in 28. American astronauts landing on the moon for the first time since 1972. Space Launch System sends Orion to lunar orbit. Crew transfers to pre-positioned SpaceX Starship. Starship lands them. They explore. Return to Orion for the trip home. 2 years from now, America would definitely get there first. That was before February 11th. Here's NASA's problem. The Space Launch System costs over $4 billion per flight. $4 billion for a single launch. Completely expendable. You heard that right. $4 billion thrown away after every flight. Production capacity is brutal. NASA can build 1 to 2 Space Launch System rockets per year maximum. Even with unlimited funding, you physically can't manufacture faster. Artemis missions happen once, maybe twice a year. That's it. Now add the Starship problem. SpaceX is developing a modified Starship to land astronauts, the Human Landing System, but regular Starship is still testing. It hasn't demonstrated orbital refueling yet, critical for lunar missions, because Starship needs multiple refueling flights to reach the moon. SpaceX has made progress, but they haven't proven the full mission profile. They haven't shown they can launch reliably, refuel with multiple tankers, coast for days in deep space, land precisely on the lunar surface, launch back to orbit, and dock with Orion. All of this has to work perfectly. First time, with human lives on the line. Is it possible by 28? Yes. Guaranteed? Absolutely not. And here's what's keeping NASA up at night. While NASA bets on untested Starship and limited Space Launch System production, China executes with validated hardware. Long March 10 reusable rocket just demonstrated it works. February 11th. Perfect landing. Mengzhou crew capsule tested same day with successful Max-Q abort. Lanue lunar lander ground tested late 25. Demonstrated touchdown and liftoff. All 3 critical systems tested and validated. China's timeline said 2030. After February 11th, analysts say 2029, maybe late 2028. NASA's targeting 28. China might hit 29. 1 year gap. And NASA's timeline keeps slipping. Artemis 2 was supposed to fly in 2024, then 2025, now March 2026. Multiple delays, cost overruns, technical issues. What if Artemis 2 reveals problems that delay Artemis 3 to 2029? What if Starship refueling takes longer? What if anything goes wrong? Meanwhile, China executes, methodically, successfully, with reusable rockets making their program economically sustainable. The nightmare scenario is increasingly plausible. After 53 years, the first humans back on the moon might not be American astronauts. They might be Chinese taikonauts. Imagine Chinese flags on the lunar surface. Chinese news broadcasts showing their achievement. The geopolitical earthquake would be massive. America put 12 men on the moon between 1969 and 72. We've been dining out on that achievement for over half a century. The bedrock of American technological prestige. If China lands first after 53 years, that narrative collapses. It wouldn't just be embarrassing. It would fundamentally shift how the world views technological leadership. And it gets worse. The moon race isn't about one landing. Apollo was flags and footprints. 12 Americans walked on the moon. They planted flags, collected rocks, conducted experiments. Then they left. We never went back. The modern moon race is different. It's about permanent presence, infrastructure, resource utilization, turning the moon into a strategic asset. The lunar South Pole has something extraordinarily valuable: Water ice, billions of tons frozen in permanently shadowed craters. That ice is worth more than gold in space, because water splits into hydrogen and oxygen. Rocket propellant. The moon becomes a refueling station for missions deeper into the solar system. Mars. Asteroid mining. Deep space exploration. Instead of launching all your fuel from Earth, you launch empty, refuel at the moon, then head to your destination. Massive fuel savings. Revolutionary missions. But you only get access if you're there permanently, with infrastructure that can extract, process, and store water ice. That requires dozens of launches, habitat modules, power systems, rovers, mining equipment, processing facilities, storage tanks, landing pads, communication systems. You can't build that with 1 or 2 missions. You need sustained presence over years. With expendable rockets, the economics are impossible. Every launch costs $150 million minimum. Building a lunar base requires 50 to 100 launches. $7.5 to $15 billion just in launch costs. With reusable rockets, costs drop 60 to 70%. $15 billion becomes $5 billion. Still expensive, but achievable. China's Long March 1.0 breakthrough just made their lunar base plans economically viable. China has publicly announced the International Lunar Research Station permanent facility at the lunar South Pole, partnership with Russia established, other nations being courted. Original timeline had first elements landing early 2032s, with reusable rockets working and hardware validated. That's accelerating. Here's how it could play out. 2029. First crewed landing establishes location. Astronauts survey, identify best sites. 2030. Second mission delivers first habitat module. 2031. Power systems and life support landed. 2032. Additional modules, rovers, equipment. Base becomes operational. By 2035, continuously occupied lunar base with rotating crews, all enabled by reusable Long March 1.0 rockets. Now imagine NASA competing with expendable $4 billion space launch system rockets. They simply can't. The math doesn't work. You can't build and maintain a lunar base when every supply mission costs more than most countries' entire space budgets. This is where February 11th becomes strategically catastrophic. It's not just about who lands first. It's about who can afford to stay, who builds infrastructure, who controls lunar resources. The nation that establishes the first permanent base sets the precedents. They decide where bases can be built, what areas are off-limits, how resources are utilized, the rules for cislunar space. First mover advantage means writing the rules everyone else follows. China now has the economic foundation to win. The Long March 1.0 can launch habitat modules, then be refurbished and launch crew, then cargo, then fuel, then supplies. The same booster flying dozens of moon missions over its operational lifetime. NASA throws away $4 billion rockets after single use. Whoever controls lunar resources controls access to deep space. The moon becomes a gateway, a refueling depot, a staging point for Mars, asteroid belt, and beyond. China's lunar base wouldn't just be about the moon. It would be about controlling infrastructure that enables everything beyond Earth orbit. The Long March 1.0 splashdown proved China can afford to compete, but the clock is ticking. 2026 through 2029, 3 years. That's the window where this race gets decided. Both programs converging on the same goal. Both have hardware, both have funding, both have political will, but only one can be first. Here's China's path. Late 26 or early 27. Full Long March 1.0 configuration reaches orbit. 3 stages, 2 bundled boosters, the complete operational rocket. Mid-2027, uncrewed Mengzhou orbital flight, validates capsule for human missions. Late 27, Lanyu demonstration in low Earth orbit, practices descent, validates systems. 2028, full dress rehearsal. Uncrewed mission sends Mengzhou and Lanyu to lunar orbit. They dock. Lander descends, lands, takes off, returns. Both vehicles come home. If that succeeds and Given China's track record, it will then 2029 becomes the crewed attempt. Methodical, step-by-step, systematic execution. Here's NASA's path. March 26. Artemis 2 launches. This absolutely cannot fail. Any problems delay Artemis 3. Late 26 through 27. SpaceX demonstrates orbital refueling. Multiple tanker flights. Propellant transfers. Never been done at this scale. Early 28. Uncrewed Starship lands on Moon. Proves the system works. Mid-2028. Artemis. 3 launches. Everything has to work perfectly. First time. With astronauts' lives depending on it. Look at those timelines. China's dress rehearsal in 28. Crewed landing 29. NASA's crewed landing targeted 28. 1 year difference, maybe less. But NASA's timeline has no margin for error. Any single setback pushes the landing to 2029, the exact year China is attempting theirs. China's timeline has built-in buffers. If something goes wrong in 28, they fix it and try again. 29 isn't a hard deadline. Plus, reusability works in their favor. Need an extra test? The Long March 10 booster can be refurbished and launched again within months. NASA has to build an entirely new space launch system, which takes years. The technological momentum is shifting. SpaceX is accelerating Starship development, but the vehicle hasn't demonstrated full mission profile yet. Orbital refueling is theoretical. Lunar landing is untested. China's hardware is proven. Mengjiao works, Lanyue works, Long March 10 works. They're not developing technology anymore. They're executing a mission plan with validated systems. Every passing month, odds shift more in China's favor. There's another factor: political risk. NASA's Artemis spans multiple presidential administrations. Budgets reviewed yearly. Congress approves funding. Political priorities shift. A supported program today might face cuts tomorrow. China's space program doesn't have that vulnerability. The government committed to lunar exploration as national priority. Funding is secure. Timeline is protected. No election cycle to derail everything. Both programs racing toward the same finish line. Both knowing second place means being remembered as the country that almost made it. For NASA, failure isn't an option. Losing the race to return would be psychologically devastating. It would call into question American technological leadership. For China, this is about establishing their position as spacefaring superpower, proving they can do what only America has done. Both nations betting their space program legacies on missions happening in the next 3 years. And the Long March 10 breakthrough made China's bet far more likely to pay off. What does this moment really mean? February 11th, 26 will be remembered as a turning point. Not just because China landed a reusable rocket, but because that 8-minute flight fundamentally changed what's possible in space. For 70 years, spaceflight has been brutally expensive. Only superpowers could afford it. The cost of throwing away rockets kept space exploration limited. SpaceX cracked the code with Falcon 9. Land boosters reliably, refurbish quickly, launch repeatedly, costs drop, flight rates increase. But SpaceX was alone. America had reusability. Nobody else did. That gave the United States massive advantages. February 11th ended that monopoly. China now has the same capability: reusable orbital-class rockets that can launch, land, and fly again. The technology is no longer exclusively American, and that changes everything. When only one nation has affordable space access, they set the pace. They decide when to go to the moon. Everyone else plays catch-up. When 2 superpowers have affordable space access, you get a race. Not Cold War space race about pure prestige. This is different. This is about establishing permanent infrastructure before your competitor does, about controlling resources, about setting precedents that will govern space activity for generations. The moon is just the beginning. Whoever establishes permanent lunar base first gains massive strategic advantages: access to water ice for propellant, experience operating in deep space, infrastructure supporting missions to Mars and beyond. The moon becomes a stepping stone, a refueling depot, a construction yard for spacecraft that never fight Earth's gravity. Reusable rockets are the economic foundation making all of that possible. China's Long March 10 didn't just land successfully. It validated they can afford to play this game long-term. They can launch repeatedly, build infrastructure gradually, sustain a lunar program for decades. That's what has NASA worried. The Space Launch System is magnificent, powerful, capable, but at $4 billion per launch with no reusability, it's economically unsustainable for regular missions. NASA can afford a few Artemis flights, maybe establish initial presence. But building permanent base, regular crew rotations, sustained operations over decades, the math doesn't work with expendable rockets. China's math does work. The Long March 10 can fly the same mission profile at a fraction of the cost, multiple times per year, instead of once or twice. Over a decade, that difference becomes overwhelming. The next 10 years will see an explosion of lunar activity. Not flags and footprints, actual infrastructure, habitats, power systems, resource extraction, multiple nations building presence on another world. All possible because reusable rockets make the economics work. China proved they have that capability. They compressed years of development into a fully functional program. They demonstrated they can compete with the United States on equal technological footing. The race to the moon is happening right now. Artemis 2 launches in weeks. China's full Long March 10 test happens later this year, both programs pushing toward crewed landings in 2028 or 2029. After 53 years, humans are finally going back to the moon. And for the first time since Apollo, the outcome isn't predetermined. America doesn't have an insurmountable lead. China isn't playing catch-up. Two superpowers, two functional lunar programs, two nations racing toward the same goal. The Long March 10 booster that splashed into the ocean on February 11th proved China can afford to compete. The reusable rocket technology makes sustained lunar operations economically viable. The validated hardware shows they're ready to execute. NASA's watching their timeline compress. The one-year gap keeps shrinking as delays accumulate, and Chinese progress continues. The world is watching to see who gets there first. Because the first boots on the moon in over half a century will carry enormous symbolic weight. They'll represent which nation leads in space technology. Which country has the vision and capability to push humanity forward? Which civilization is writing the next chapter of human space exploration? China's reusable rocket breakthrough didn't just change their lunar program. It changed the entire race. It made their timeline credible. It made their ambitions achievable. It made the possibility of Chinese taikonauts reaching the moon before American astronauts very, very real. And it all came down to 8 minutes on February 11th, 2026. One rocket, one perfect landing, one breakthrough that proved China isn't just competing in the space race, they're winning it.